Okay, so you need to be able to calculate the area and perimeter of a sector. Now, a sector is a part or fraction of a circle. So, for example, if I have an arc, which is part of the outside of a circle, and I connect it with two radii, that's the plural of radius, okay? Because they're both radii, they're exactly the same length. So if this is 7, this is going to be 7 as well. Now, to be able to calculate a sector, you need two things. You need to be able to calculate, you need to know the radii length and also the proportion of the angle that it takes up. So for instance, if this was 51 degrees, this would be 51 out of a possible 360. Sorry, it's really badly drawn. Okay. So if you want to work out the area, you would calculate the area of the circle normally, so pi r squared, but for the sector area, which I'm going to call SA, you need to calculate the fraction of degrees you have out of the possible 360 that would have been the entire circle. So for example here, we would calculate the area of this entire circle, but by multiplying this area by our 51 degrees out of the possible 360 for the entire circle, that essentially reduces the area that we've calculated down to the 51 degrees that we need worth of area. So the trick is to calculate your area and then multiply it by the proportion of degrees out of 360 that you have. You need to tell your calculator that you started off with 360 degrees worth of area, and now you only need 51 of it. So you can either divide your area by 360 and times it by the amount of degrees you actually have, which would be 51, or you can just write that as a fraction and multiply it by your area. So in this case, I would have my sector area would be pi times 7 squared multiplied by 51 degrees out of the full 360 I would have started with. So I have 49, because that's 7 squared, times pi times 51 over 360. So now you would type it into a calculator. So let's press it on. So 49 times pi, oh, whoops, sorry, in case I have it, times pi, no, sorry, shift pi, there we go, 49 times pi times, and I'm going to write it as a fraction, 51 over my 360, and that gives me 833 over 120 lots of pi. Now that is going to look nicer as a decimal, so I would round it to 2 decimal places. So that means I'm going to only write 2 decimal places at the end. So I'm going to have 21.81, because if we just quickly go through a rounding recap, if it's to 2 dp, to 2 decimal places, that means that I'm only allowed to write 2 decimal places at the end of my number. Now at the moment I have 21, when I typed it into the calculator, 21.807889. Okay, if I'm only allowed to write 2 decimal places, I have to stop writing here. So I need to decide, is this number here that I have, is it closer to 21.80 or is it closer to 21.81? Now notice my next number is 7, so it's over the halfway line between 21.80 and 21.81, so we're going to round up. So this would be what I would write as my final answer. And to show the examiner what I've done, and that's what's really important, is to actually write down how you've rounded. So actually to tell the examiner that you've rounded to 2 decimal places, and that shows them that you can do it accurately. Don't just pick a number and write it down. Make sure you explain any manipulations you've done to your number to make it nicer to look at. So let's just have a look at this again. To work out your sector, you need to calculate your area for your entire circle and then multiply the angle that you have out of 360, because that gives you then the section, hence why it's called a sector, of what you need. So this is the calculation, going from a fractional form into a decimal using a calculator. This is the decimal we got, and to make it easier to work with, I've rounded to 2 decimal places. Now, one really important thing to notice is if you had a decimal here rather than a whole number, say for instance 7.9, make sure that however they've written the answer, if they don't specify how to round it, that you round in the same form as the question does. If it's a whole number, usually I tend to write to 2 decimal places just to show them that I understand the level of accuracy there. But if they state that if their length of radius they give you is a decimal to 2 decimal places, you must round your answer to the same amount of decimal places, or else you imply there's more accuracy in your answer than there should be.